Okay, I think everything is functional and working. So thank you all for putting up with that. And King, that's kind of a weird story, but thank you for giving us inspiration, because now we can go out there and we have to wonder in our own campaigns, can we have an odd occurrence like this happen? Maybe someone broke into a monastery somewhere and spilled a bunch of ink on a book that was being copied. And who didn't, and wanted to blame it on one of the other old monks? Who didn't want this book being transcribed, or something along those lines? Ideas have shape, yeah, like a squished spider diagram is what I like calling them. All right, so Eberron, 5th edition. To some controversy, this has come out on Monday in the DM Guild, and I figured let's take a look at it and see if it is worth a fuss or if there could be some good content in here. King says, I remember having a dream about some dumb idea I had in high school, and my mind backed away from it, and it was just some weird loopy shape, like it was something my mind was stuck in back in the day. Bubonic, yeah, it's Coke Zero. Yeah, so just drawing a weird shape you see, too. And then use your words to describe it. That's very good advice, King. All right. So this is $20 for a PDF, and it's a whole campaign setting that you're getting. An introduction. Here's the welcome to the main continent. And then we have an area of the races of Eberron, including the 4 that are unique to Eberron: Changelings, Kalishtar, Shifters, and Warforged. Tomorrow, we are going to make a Changeling and a Kalishtar character. Then on Friday, we will make a Shifter and a Warforged character. Pardon. However, there are notes for the other major fantasy races in D&D. Also unique to Eberron are something called dragon marks. And we can explore what those are and how those function. Various magic items, and well, we'll go from there. Now, a concern that a lot of people have is that if you look here, explore the world of Eberron in this campaign prototype for the world's greatest role-playing game. And that had people kind of puckering up saying, whoa, okay, hang on. I'm paying $20 for playtest material? And in a sense, you are, yes. However, as this playtest material continues to be revised, so, I mean, King or others who really love digging into this stuff and giving feedback, this PDF is going to be updated and re-released to those who had purchased it for free. So you are buying a living PDF document if you invest in this Eberron PDF. King wants me to Control F Jeremy Crawford. Sure. All right, so here you go, King. With a Control F, Jeremy Crawford, Mike Merles, and Kate Welch are credited in the additional design. Memory Lab says, I have a very conceptual, visionary, and imaginary mind, or imaginatory, always have. Everything in my head I have to put into words. Doodles have never helped much for me, but thanks for the suggestions. I usually wait on the brewing of the thoughts in my mind till a light bulb goes off, and then right till I can't go any further. King says, well, when we find something stupid, we know who's responsible for it. Yes, Jeremy Crawford does, in fact, seem to be your nemesis. However, his name only appears once in that additional design credit. So, there we go. So, this is a note from it opens up with the creator of the Eberron campaign. Because in 3rd edition, to help usher it in, there was a contest where people could submit their own homebrew worlds to Wizards of the Coast, and they would select one of them to be an official D&D campaign setting. And here we have the winner, who's now, survived through 3rd, 4th, and now is getting into 5th edition. So, bear in mind, this book presents my current vision of Eberron. This is the world I run at my own table, and the way that I've converted its ideas in the 5th edition. The game mechanics are usable in your campaign, but at this time, they aren't officially a part of the game and aren't permitted in D&D Adventure League events. These mechanics will evolve based on player feedback. This is a living document, and as these concepts are refined, this book will also be updated for free, so you'll be kept up to date with any changes that are made to it. Beyond that, Eberron is your world as much as it is mine, and so on and so forth. What is Eberron? Now, this is Eberron if you wish to run it as its own pure campaign setting as its creator intended. If you do what I do, I just strip elements out and I incorporate it into my own homebrew game, such as races, classes, spells, that kind of a thing. However, all of the contents of this world are kept together because of the contextual concept of it. What is Eberron? It's a world bound by a golden ring and surrounded by 12 moons. It's the intersection of 13 planes of existence. So, King, this is where I go, ew, planes of existence, yucky. Which shift in and out of alignment. It's a place where magic has been harnessed as a tool, used to build cities, to sail ships through the skies, to create both wonders and weapons. Eberron embraces swashbuckling action and pulp adventure and adds a layer of neo-noir intrigue. Stories don't always end well, and there isn't a perfect answer to every problem. The last war turned old allies into bitter enemies and destroyed an entire nation, leaving terrible scars behind. Crime and corruption lurk in the great cities of Corvair. Hidden dragons shape the course of history. Sinister fiends influence the dreams of the unwary. Human greed and ambition may prove more dangerous than any devil or demon. But through this darkness, there are opportunities for a group of bold adventurers to make a difference, for better or worse. From warforged and airships to the mighty dragon-marked houses, magic is a part of the world and its stories. Eberron is very much a magical world. In fact, it's an industrial world. But instead of something like steampunk or diesel punk, I guess if you want to call it magic punk, I don't know what else you'd call it, but magic is intrinsic to Eberron and what occurs there. And it's a lot more common because it is harnessed in all of these different ways. Pulp adventure, whether you're leaping from an airship or battling demons in forgotten ruins, Eberron encourages cinematic action and swashbuckling adventure. Eberron is a world of difficult choices. The line between hero and villain is easily blurred, and even the champions of light may have things they regret. The last war... Alright, so we're getting into some details. I'm not here to narrate the entire PDF to you all, but I want to set the stage and get us in the mood so when we make these characters, we have some things that we can think about. If you need me to go back to a particular page or concept, please let me know, and I will do my best to go back and review it, and we can go over it, or I can narrate something. In Eberron, arcane magic is a form of science. The spells and rituals of wizards and artificers have been developed and honed over centuries, and those principles have been incorporated into daily life. Magic is used for entertainment, transportation, communication, warfare, and much more. While magic is widespread, there are limits to its power. You can book passage on an airship or get an illness cured by lesser restoration, but resurrection, teleportation, and similar effects are hard to come by. True wizards are rare and remarkable. Most common magic is performed by a working class of mage rights, professional spellcasters who master a small handful of rituals or cantrips. The magical services available in Corvair are discussed in more detail, etc. and so forth. Dragonmark Dynasties. The magical economy is dominated by a handful of powerful families in the guilds they maintain. These are the Dragonmarked houses, barons of industry, whose influence rivals that of kings and queens. These dynastic houses derive their power from their dragon marks, arcane sigils that are passed down through their bloodlines. A dragon mark grants limited but useful magical abilities, and over the course of centuries, the houses have used these powers to establish powerful monopolies. And so it gets a little bit more delved into there. And this is kind of a... Eberron, this release, is a sister announcement to Ravnica City of Guilds being released in November as a hard copy supplement to Dungeons & Dragons. And through no mere coincidence, that's also when we're going to be returning back to Ravnica in the Magic the Gathering trading card game too. Fluffy Sheep, any sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from technology. It's, you actually kind of reminded me, Fluffy Sheep. There was, in a Vampire the Masquerade game, there was an aristocratic vampire that I played with, and he just, it's not that he couldn't learn about the modern knights and what was going on, but he continually referred to cell phones as correspondence wands. Kind of bleeding a little bit over into mage, because that's, I mean, this, as a vampire character, he was aware of different elements in the world of darkness and mages and such. And so he would ask people that, you know, if there's an emergency, he has to borrow their correspondence wand. I thought that was a fun little detail. But yes, any sufficient advanced magic is indistinguishable from technology. In fact, that's what set up the whole technocracy. For the technocracy, the technomancers in Mage, as a villain. Because they were trying to modernize magic and make it indistinguishable, which was undermining the traditional forms of magic that had to be a lot more discreet in how they practiced. Memory says, like in D&D, what a small village or town would look like and behave in a world on a larger scale. And I'm sorry, that's on the heels of the comment. I've always done things in a very weird order as well. If I could explain it somehow, it would be like this. I always have macro level ideas. Then I think of what's on the micro level, and then connect the two slowly but surely. That makes sense to me, Memory. And I think many of us, with these creative streaks, it's like with economics. Do you want to start macro and go micro? Or do you say, no, macro can only exist because of micro, not the other way around? Or that the two somehow aren't connected or interlinked? It's fascinating how each of our minds works. And what can work very well for King, you know, kind of waking up and making these diagrams and writing stuff down, that may not be how you do things, Memory Lapse. And yet you're still producing content that you enjoy, that you want to hopefully share with others. In fact, King says, I'd say your metaphor is a bit off here. The things you read are the obstacles you must overcome with your kung fu, and are not a style in themselves, though experiencing them might teach you how to overcome them. Blah, 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 try different things. So, you can see here, everyday magic. There is a railroad that exists. There are elemental airships. Street lamps exist with these ever-bright lanterns. Phones of a sort, right? Functionally similar to a telegraph, so towns can communicate through these speaking stones. And there is a race that Bubonic One loves called Warforged, which are golems. You could play as effectively a golem PC. The heroes of pulp adventure are often able to overcome seemingly impossible odds. One way to reflect this is to use the optional hero points rule from Chapter 9 of the DMG. This is optional. Hero points change the balance of the game and give player characters an opportunity to turn certain failure into success. It's a way to make heroes feel large... Oh, here we go. We got one. It's a way to make heroes feel largely than life. Aha, it should be larger. Let's all push our glasses up now. Come on. And we will write our letters of complaint to Wizards of the Coast for allowing such a heinous error to occur. But it's not a good match for every story. And I did want to bring up, as this is referencing the other books, I wanted to bring up what we can find. And we're going to look up hero points. Hero points work well in epic fantasy and mythic campaigns in which the characters are meant to be more like superheroes than the average adventurer is. With this option, the character starts with 5 hero points at first level. Each time the character gains a level, he or she loses any unspent hero points and gains a new total equal to 5 plus half the character's level. A player can spend a hero point whenever he or she makes an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw. The player can spend the hero points after the roll is made, but before any of the results are applied. Spending the hero point allows the player to roll a d6 and add it to the d20, possibly turning a failure into a success. A player can spend only 1 hero point per roll. Pint and Pie, thank you very much for the follow. Welcome aboard. Have a seat at our table at a game store, and you're welcome to be a part of the conversation as we're digging into the Eberron 5e setting. In addition, whenever a character fails a death saving throw, the player can spend 1 hero point to turn the failure into a success. Memory says, and how would someone perform the same action as another if once learned? How would one make it their own? And many more questions like those to be asked. King says, a lot of highly lethal systems use a variation of hero points. Like Riddle of Steel has spiritual attributes for when it gets real. And in Dark Heresy, there's also fate points, which you can burn if you would die otherwise in order to not die. Yeah, Fluffy, wouldn't that have been useful if we decided to go with some of these options? Optional rule, environmental elements. Combat can feel very mechanical. I move 10 feet, I make an attack roll, I use a reaction. One way for the DM to encourage more cinematic action is to present a list of environmental elements. In a tavern, this list could include chandelier, plate glass window, roaring fireplace, tray of drinks, drunk patron. If you're fighting in an ancient tomb, the list could be pile of gold coins, scattered bones, rotting tapestry, moss-covered statue. Each turn, a player can work one of these elements into their description of their action. The primary purpose of this is to give players ideas, interesting details to use while describing their actions. But if a player comes up with a particularly clever way of using it as an element, the DM... Oh, Ostomer, thank you. Welcome. Welcome. Your hosts are always wonderful. Good morning to you. As you live in the future... In Eberron, it is also encouraging you to play with this neo-noir intrigue element. Hey, Ostomer. Oh, Pint and Pie asks, I was just surfing for D&D 5e. Is Eberron 5e the same? Okay, so Pint and Pie. Eberron was a campaign world that became officially a part of the D&D multiverse during 3rd edition. Well, I think it was 3.5 technically. When Wizards held a contest for players of Dungeons & Dragons to submit their worlds to them, and they would choose one to make into the next campaign setting. And so Eberron has been around since 3.5 and has survived through 4th edition. And now we are examining its proposed set of rules or expanded content in 5th edition itself. This PDF was released on DM's Guild on Monday, and so it's brand new, and it's a living document that as they continue to get feedback, things will be adjusted, and you might wish to work elements of Eberron into your own homebrew world, or use this document itself as a guide to run a game within Eberron itself. So it's going to give you a blurb, and it's going to encourage you to try and run this neo-noir, this intrigue, as the houses in Eberron vie for power. You have you're coming off of this civil war that occurred, and so there could still be tensions and other things. And in fact, there is some optional content here that if you want to run this as a part of your character, it will help you to ask questions about your character, similar to a background and personality traits. Yes, it is a setting that has officially existed in D&D and is now kind of getting its foot in the door in 5th edition properly. So right now, Pint and Pie, consider this like a really big unearthed arcana. It's officially unofficial, or unofficially official. I don't know how you'd like to look at that. It should give you ideas, and as the R&D team gets feedback from the user community on balancing or mechanics or just something, we found a word misused, then they will revise this document. So if you invest the $20 in this PDF, it's a living document that you will receive updated versions. Yep, memory. So here, if you want to give, that kind of noir, a little bit of grittiness, everyone has a flaw, as I say during character creation. A flaw is one thing. If you would like some inspiration for a regret for your character, here's a table with 10 options. While you were serving in the last war, you were forced to abandon an injured comrade. You don't know if they survived. That's a regret your character carries. You placed your faith and your fortune in the hands of a lover who betrayed you. You don't know if you can ever trust anyone again. You engaged in covert operations for a nation, either as a spy or a soldier. While you were serving your country, you did unforgivable things. You volunteered for mystical experiments. These may be responsible for your class abilities, Sorcerer, Spellcasting, Barbarian, Rage, but you don't know if there will be side effects. Bubonic, this is actually where that character of yours. I remember you talking about him way early on in the channel. So everyone has regrets. This is a way to get you to think about it. The balance of pulp and noir. It will go a little bit more into that if you enjoy that kind of story and that kind of setting. Also, how about ask this? Does your character have a debt of some kind? Why do you need 200 gold pieces? A flaw or regret is something that shapes your personality, something that plays an ongoing role in your story. But perhaps you have a problem that needs to be resolved right now. This is entirely optional. As a player, you could choose to roll or select an option from the debts table. Why would you possibly want to take on a debt? It's a way to add depth to your character and to provide a compelling, immediate motive for adventuring. You're not just out to get rich. You need gold to get that bounty off your head. It's also an opportunity to establish something that can be a part of your character moving forward. If you're trying to reclaim a magic item from a pawn shop, it lets you establish that your character has the magic item, which could be an heirloom, something you created, a gift from a mentor. You've just temporarily lost it. If you're trying to raise money to join a secret society, it establishes that your membership in this organization may be a part of the story later on. So, here are some examples for debts that your character can have. You've got a gambling problem. If you can't repay Dask, who's a character in Chapter 6, you're going to be playing tag with a cockatrice. Someone knows the whereabouts of a sibling or loved one you thought lost in the morning, which is a region in Corvair, in Eberron. But that information is going to cost you. Your family lost everything in the last war. 200 gold pieces would get them a stake in a new farm, inn, or stagecoach. Kind of like, you know what this kind of reminds me? And King, maybe you could appreciate this. It's giving me, you get this noir, this pulp, you know, kind of this grittiness, especially with the family lost everything. It's kind of reminding me of Darkest Dungeon. I don't know if you're getting that feel, and I know that that's a game that you like. But you could consider, if you like a game like Darkest Dungeon, possibly running that inside of 5th edition using Eberron. Right? You want to develop the estate. You want to go into these old places that are haunted or that have this gritty, dark feel to them. You've got a price on your head. Until you settle things with House Thrashk, you better keep an eye out for bounty hunters. Roll again. It's not your debt, it's your lover's problem. Can you solve the problem before they have to face the consequences? Now it gets into some history for the campaign setting with the last war. This was a big old civil war. This is when the Warforged were created. Now, after that war, Warforged are not allowed to be created, but those who still exist are allowed to exist. Here's a few of the major effects that the war has had, so you can introduce these ideas. If you're running an Eberron campaign, they're there. Or if you have something similar that happened in your homebrew world, you could borrow some ideas, modify them as necessary, and insert them into your own world. Memory lapse, yes. I believe that WotC is going to be sticking with 5th edition for a long time. And that they are going to be, they're using 5th edition as kind of an evergreen role-playing base upon which you can insert a module or a rule set of some kind and run the game in that fashion. King says, that part was kind of Darkest Dungeon-y since every character besides the bounty hunter had some sort of major regret. Yeah, alright, we're getting an idea. There's different military backgrounds. You're a common soldier facing the enemy on the front lines. You served in the open seas. And this is, mind you, too, this is mimicking the soldier background in Chapter 4 of the PHB, the sailor. But look, we also have noble, charlatan, and entertainer. Here's an acolyte. Now I looked, here's a folk hero. All 13 of the backgrounds are not presented formally on this chart. Could you wiggle them around? You know, how far away is a criminal from a charlatan? How far away could an urchin be from either a criminal or charlatan, or an urchin from, I don't know, an acolyte because you were taken in or something along those lines? However, this is a way for you to take your background, even if it was as an acolyte, and give it a militaristic background or a feel, a flavor, if you wished. If you're a folk hero, you oppose the war. The actions you took to protect the innocent have made you a local legend. Hey, GC, good to see you. Welcome back. King says they're grabbing the McNerd crowd. I don't know if I'm familiar with that term, a McNerd. King, can you define that for me? Now we're getting into particulars of the campaign setting, the morning and the Mournland. How this could affect your characters within Eberron. What it meant, because this was a large cataclysmic event. A dungeon the size of a nation? How about that, huh? Here are ways that your character may have interacted with the morning. As a barbarian, you could have been a simple peasant caught in it. Everyone else in your community was killed, but their spirits were bound to you. Your barbarian rage represents you channeling these vengeful ghosts. Is there a way to lay these spirits to rest? Do they have unfinished business they want you to resolve? So this is flavoring your barbarian, that instead of just being, you know, big McLarge huge, or, you know, slab bulkhead the barbarian, you are actually, you're haunted or you're possessed by ghosts. You have, mechanically, you're exactly the same. Thematically, you're different than a standard barbarian, right? You're someone who is possessed by these ghosts of the past, of this tragic event. As a sorcerer, your arcane powers could be the result of your exposure to the morning. Were you physically transformed as well, or are your powers only the manifestation of the morning? Are you comfortable using your abilities, or are you afraid that you may increase the power of the morning with each spell cast? As a warlock, your patron could be interested in the morning and drive you to learn more about it. So this is nice because it's getting you to shake up the common conception of the classes as presented in the PHB. Bubonic One seems to be appreciating where this is going. King says, quick and easy nerds who are into D&D because it's fashionable. It's why they're running a crusade against quote-unquote gatekeepers. A crusade against gatekeepers. I think I get what you're saying there, King, but who's considered to be a gatekeeper in your example? We come into what was the cause of it. Okay, King. Oh, wonderful backwards-handed Rakshasa. Nom 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 nom. They are excellent villains, and villains and not villains at the same time. So now we're getting into a lot of the background, the history, mysticism, and we will touch on the religions inside of Eberron also coming up here. You have almost all of the 3.5 Eberron books? 3.5 was a bloated mess, so he can have that point. Let's see what... Mike Merle says, funny how many of the same fans who insist on gatekeeping via rules complexity and lore density also have a problem with women in tabletop gaming. Hey guys, you're all fired from D&D. Find another game. Wow, that's kind of, that is kind of an inflammatory comment from someone who's a developer. I mean, anything about his user icon or whatnot aside. That sounds very... like you're casting the same, assertions or dispersions against an anonymous group that presumably you would be upset if someone did to your group. I don't know, maybe... I don't know if he retracted that tweet or something. He obviously didn't delete it, but... it looks like he did offer some apologies or something in there, too. So here's all kinds of lore that exists within Eberron that you as a DM who wants to present it, well, you can do so. You can get in there and the world is already rich for you as you present it to your players. If you run a custom game, you like how something like this sounds, that's fine. Pick at it. Pick and choose. Weave stuff that you've read elsewhere into your homebrew. I've done it in a lot of different instances. There's not really shame in doing so. There's nothing new under the sun, and if you could take a good idea and work with it, weave it into your campaign, and eventually make it your idea. Put your own spin on it. Work it into a set of context that exists outside of this this canned campaign setting. Have fun with it. If it exists in D&D, there's a place for it in Eberron, but it may not be the place you're used to. Eberron draws on the core elements of D&D. It's a world of wizards and rogues, a setting with halflings and dwarves and elves. Want an Audiog? Orcs, goblins, paladins, they're all there. Eberron draws on the same basic elements as other settings, but it often diverges from the traditional archetypes assigned to those things. A few factors here. No fixed alignments. Mortal creatures are shaped by their culture and personal circumstances. An orc is just as likely to be lawful good as chaotic evil, depending on their personal history. A gold dragon, a beholder, a halfling. You can't make automatic assumptions about any of them. In part, this is because of Eberron's distant gods. Orcs aren't driven by Grumpsh's fury, and the gnolls aren't tied to Yinalgu. The exceptions to this rule are creatures whose identities are shaped by magic. Fiends and celestials embody pure ideals of good and evil. Lycanthropes are driven by a curse. Monsters aren't always villains, and villains aren't always monsters. Many of the gnolls of Droem are more honorable than the human mercenaries in House Deneth. In Karnath and Erinal, undead are used as tools. You certainly could find yourself fighting a merciless minotaur in the slums of Sharn, but you're just as likely to cross swords with a cruel halfling cutthroat. There's a place for everything in Eberron, but it may not be a prominent one. Kenku aren't mentioned in any of the canon source books of Eberron. There's many ways to add Kenku to Eberron, but that doesn't mean that there need to be a Kenku nation or that Kenku have played a significant role in history. It may be that a dozen Kenku were thrown out of the fairy court of Thelanis, and these are all the Kenku in the world. So just because it's possible to put anything you want in the world, don't assume that the streets of Sharn are a zoo flooded with every character race that's ever been suggested. Chapter 3 provides advice on adding new races to Eberron. Here's a few other ways that you can add something into Eberron with minimal impact on the setting. 1. It comes from the vast and largely unexplored continent of Zendrick. 2. It was created or caused by the Morning, the mystical cataclysm that destroyed Sire, and has only been around for 4 years. 3. It's a product of the underworld of Kyber, the source of many aberrations and monsters. 4. It's the result of recent experiments by one of the dragon-marked houses or a mad artificer. Or 5. It comes from one of the planes and slipped into the world during a recent convergence. Also, and this is good advice not just for Eberron, but for your own world, not everything has to exist. I've said this on our channel during some workshop sessions before. If you don't want halflings, if you don't want short stack races like halflings and gnomes to exist in your world, even goblins, it doesn't have to, just because it's in the core rulebook. Do you want to make a nation that has a strong taboo against fire magic? Then you can remove Firebolt, Fireball, Firestorm, etc. and so forth as optional spells for your characters to take. I do custom stuff too. You know, resurrection type spells, planar spells. Even in teleportation, there's some modifications or limitations. And you can even say, well, look, I don't mind allowing the concept of a fireball mechanically to exist. It's just that there's a huge taboo against fire. And so actually it's cold damage. So it's called cold ball or something. Or you could call it like water ball, and it deals cold damage because it's been summoned from the bottom of the sea, and it's just like excruciatingly cold water that explodes in a big radius at a point. You can reflavor as much as you want, or you can exclude what you'd like from your world as well. It is very possible if you want to run a D&D. I mean, Eberron's not really the best example of this. You can run a low or no magic D&D game. Yes, things will change, and the concept or how you run your campaign world will change. But just as this says for Eberron, and if you wish to use it, not everything has to exist. Tri-C, the Empire in my homebrew world has outlawed dangerous spells. And yeah, 5e also Tri-C, it does make things easy to mix and match. Can you give some examples of what this Empire has banned in your homebrew world, Coffee Cat? Memory says, what I said earlier actually correlates to what you said in a way, King. Forgotten Realms is just the boot up and beginning of 5e. They don't want FF to be too overly complicated, so new players can be introduced to the game easily. Once they move on to another world, they'll complicate things a little bit more. When we see them move from FF, you mean like FR, Forgotten Realms? Otherwise, I'm getting FF as Final Fantasy. Forgotten Realms to another world, it will signal that 5e is now middle-aged and that WotC has now moved on to the next stage of production. Okay, yeah, FR, Forgotten Realms. Bubonic One says, I got the main guy at Paizo to say if you want to use a competitor's campaign world or a hodgepodge of many for PF2, go ahead. Yeah. It's story. All of these are storytelling games. Mix and match. I use concepts from novels, even sci-fi novels, in a high fantasy game. I use aspects of D&D in World of Darkness. You know, I'm a big old weeaboo. I read manga. I watch anime. I play Final Fantasy games. You better believe I've taken inspiration from those games or assets of it, like art or mechanical ideas or music, and I've interwoven those in my own world as well. So you can find a place in Eberron for anything, but it's also possible to say that something doesn't exist. For example, if you wanted to use Grumsh in Eberron, you could reimagine him as one of the demon overlords of the First Age. You could decide that he's the classic Grumsh who has recently found his way to Eberron from the core cosmology. But the DM can always say, no, there's no version of Grumsh in my Eberron. This comes to a critical point. Nothing is set in stone. Like every source book that's come before it, this book is intended to be a source of inspiration. Use what inspires you, but always feel empowered to change the world to better suit the story you want to tell. There's a place in Eberron for everything in that exists in D&D, but it's up to you to make use of it. Tracy says, each person who wishes to purchase or use magic spells, one has to get a permit. Tiefling were to use their innate ability, or if a Tiefling were to use their innate ability to Hellish Rebuke without a permit, they could be arrested. Ah, gotcha. So it is very controlled. You know what? That can make for some very interesting storytelling, Coffee Cat. By the way, if you need inspiration, let me know. Because in our first 5th edition homebrew in my world, the area that the players started in, all magic was outlawed and taboo. Only the people outside of the main area ever practiced it, and they were considered, savages, wild people, barbarians, etc. And so how to run, especially when the party was going to consist of magical characters, we had to incorporate some kind of a system that you find in Mage. Like, they had to make their magic coincidental, otherwise they'd be caught. It had to make sense, it had to fit in, because even their best friends and family were loyal enough to turn them in for casting spells, because casting spells is a very bad thing, and casting spells is what led to, the big bad things that happened before the campaign started. So if anyone shows a hint of being able to cast magic, or they have, these federal authorities would come in and arrest them and take them away. Your Wizlock has been sent to jail once for magic use. Memory says, when it comes to races, classes, nations, etc., it doesn't need to exist outside of the scope of things. It doesn't have to exist until it needs to exist. Yes, you don't have to have everything immediately out in front and reference 1,000 pages at all points in time. Here are some ways that you can conceptualize the other races in Eberron, or for you to rethink ways in your own. Halflings can be found as merchants and innkeepers, but in their homeland, they're dinosaur-riding rangers and barbarians. Orcs are a proud and primal people. While they've never built great cities, they were the first druids of Eberron. Many continue these ancient traditions to fight to protect Eberron from aberrations, while others have fallen prey to the madness of the Daelkyr. I've certainly put through, King, earmuffs here, because I'm going to talk about elves for a second. In my world, elves fell under a racial curse, like it was a part of their genetics, their blood. And elves became the shortest lived race. They were dying naturally around 30 years old. Because of this, it was almost a literal devil's deal that was made. In exchange for something, their great longevity was reduced, and they were the shortest lived race. And so they would just naturally die in their prime, like in their 30s. You know, if one lived to 40, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You know, what are you eating and drinking? I'll have 2 of them. And so what had happened is, because you know, think of the ramifications. Memory lapse. This is kind of what you were indicating that you do. In a culture where you are lucky to live to 30, let alone anything higher, they practiced necromancy, and they actually had undead as servants. It was kind of a reverse form of ancestor worship, where they considered the dead to be worshiping the living, or providing a service, an ongoing service to the living. Because you only lived until you were 30 or so. And so, you know, their lives were very much filled with joy and song and you know, in a little bit of labor. But living was easy. It's just that you realized that when you died, you'd be put to work. When you died, you would be sent to plow the fields. You'd be sent to repair foundations. You'd be sent to thatch roofs. You'd be sent to haul cargo. You'd be sent in case of times of war, or you need to defend yourself, that you'd be sent out to defend those fragile living members of your family. And some very cool innovations had come out of a society that was built like that. But, you know, just think of the cultural impacts, and you can see blurbs of it here in this Eberron guide. Take these ideas and run with them in your own world. King says, I'm fine with the lore reset. I just don't like their weird mass appeal zealotry, where they want to do sassy snaps and talk down to people. Oh, well, I know. We can get... Unfortunately, and this is something that I studied as a part of my master's degree, King. We do see that there is an overstepping or an overarching trend right now in business culture to be what we may commonly call virtue signalers. Or, I mean, if we want to say something like social justice warrior, you know, words like that can have a bit of a negative tinge to them. But here we have a corporate culture that is stepping up in some maybe ironic ways, where organized religion had once ruled over and given morality to the masses, to countries and whatnot. We now are seeing in a more secular age, corporations who have cultural influence stepping up as the old organized religions of lore, or of yore, did, in order to exert their morals and their tut-tuts and their own language over customer bases, and can deny service to people, or can make people feel awkward or ostracized, just as churches excommunicated people who didn't believe, or, you know, branded them heretics, or denied them some kind of a service for not being a part of that culture. And it's something that we're seeing going on right now. I'm trying to say that in a very neutral way, because it happens in a lot of instances along a lot of different lines. King, so are you telling me that there are undead mercenaries just wandering around looking at their plump 30-year-old man-child grandsons, letting out undead equivalents of a sigh before stitching their left arm? Not well. They were not all conscious. They weren't all intelligent undead, King. In fact, many of the dead were actually just stored in a giant crypt beneath what otherwise looked like a humble town. And unfortunately, due to events in the campaign world, maybe tens of thousands of undead elf warriors or other servants could have been awakened and started, not following orders. Tracy, the overall political climate of campaign reflects that. I don't know if you might have had a mistype, Tracy. Memory lapse, and again, if the gods don't exist, would a class like a cleric or paladin? And if they do, a class like a paladin still takes an oath, but to what? It doesn't have to be towards a demon or devil, neither. It could be towards the natural, yeah. It could also just be the firm resolve that it is within oneself. And whereas a sorcerer is getting their magic biologically, if you have a world without gods or remote gods or something along those lines, your cleric, your paladin, finds the power inside them. It is their power of friendship. It is their willpower that is manifesting because of their dedication to their ideals. Not necessarily just a gift from a god, no matter how close or distant that this external being is. And in that case, so we kind of have a push force, a pull force, and this neutral force, where we have, where you have clerics and paladins, etc., are having this push force, right? It's coming from within them, and it's more maybe a neutral. Whereas the sorcerer is this push. It is just bubbling up inside them, pushing them onwards. It's a part of who they are, whether they like it or not. Whereas the personality of the neutral ones is just that. It's a neutral force in their life that they can obey or they can lose. Right? It could be difficult to just automatically stop being a sorcerer without something happening. However, you lose faith, you lose your will, and you break your oaths. Suddenly, you might not have access to those powers. And then you have a pull. You have a pull force where you have this carrot that is dangled in front of you as someone like a warlock. And so the pursuit of that carrot is actually what is fueling you. It's like chasing a comet, and the comet's tail is infusing you with power. And so you'll continue to chase that comet because it's granting you power and inspiration and to go from there. When you don't even need a great old one. You just need this ideal that you're following. And this ideal forms an obsession, a compulsion, a strong emotion inside your character. And that is, like with the other traits, that's what spawns your magic. That's what creates this pact, which is like an oath. How far apart are paladins and warlocks? Or clerics, for that matter, or even druids? Oh, you meant the climate of your campaign? Gotcha, Tracy. Fluffy sheep, something has to power divine magic if gods aren't real. There's already conquest. Tyranny doesn't seem too far off. Step by step by step. Alright, so now here you get welcome to Corvair. You get a very good, by the way, not just with the words. Look, here's these magical lifts. Here's airships. We have a lot of interaction going on. Here's one of these ever-bright lanterns so that the world is alight. And it's showing a reliance on magic in the infrastructure. Whoop. The difference between a paladin and a warlock is one has an employer and the other has a sugar daddy. That's a very interesting way of looking at it, King. I don't think I can argue against that one. Or even if I could, I would just choose not to. An anti-pally is a fun class, as is a pally of a line totally towards neutrality. Should it be the Shadow Marshes instead of the Marches? Well, marches are their own type of... Here, I'll bring it up. King's on the ball, though. Attractive land along a border of a country or a frontier. So it's like saying the Shadow Frontier or the dark border or something like that. Memory says, if the gods don't exist, do demons and devils exist in this world? Well, yeah, in Eberron, it was talking about demons and devils. Though gods exist in Eberron, they are just more distant in their description. And we'll actually get to them in a little bit here. Dargon, Dragoon, Drago, Dar, Drr, Drr. Dargoon. Perfect. Whilst elsewhere on the map is the land of evil psionic empire. Yes, meanwhile, elsewhere, in Eberron... Oh, gotcha. So yep, there's your map, and it'll be going over that here. It'll talk about the different areas, and you may want to do this. You may want to do this for your own campaign world. In fact, this isn't too far away from what we do in our workshops when we make regions, especially when we made Mesotopia. This is a very good example of this style of presentation. Magic beats mundane, so this is a good cultural note. Why use your hand when you could use a mage hand? Who still uses a bow when you could use a wand? Sovereigns above, Willis! We're days away from the 11th century and you're still shooting people with pointed sticks? Kubara is obviously Kuwabara from Yu Yu Hakusho. Oh, if I could do that voice regularly, that would be something else. Brayland, industry, manufactured goods. So it's going through each of the regions. Again, use this as inspiration if you want to run in Eberron. It gives you a good, quick, and dirty flavor of the place and what it does and the people who come from there. The Boromar leadership are halflings with ties to Talenta Plains. Other notable criminal organizations include the Monsters of Dask and House Tarkanin, an alliance of assassins and thieves with aberrant dragon marks. Brailish characters, etc., etc. Siren, we're going to continue going down. If you want me to review any of this, please let me know. I'm not skipping ahead because I'm bored or I don't think it's important. I want to introduce the idea. If you like it and you want to go back and review something, then we can go back and do so. Dargul characters. Constant struggle, loyalty or clan. Mut and Acha. Ah, here you go, King. You wanted to go live in the demon wastes? There is no capital. And it is noted for fiends, pestilence, and violence. Rivers of lava cut across plains of black sand and volcanic glass. The only vegetation you can see is blood-red moss and a thick layer of slime, and that appears to be moving. A jagged rock formation might be a piece of an ancient wall. Or perhaps that's just your imagination. This is the Demon Wastes. Tens of thousands of years ago, fiends ruled Corvair. This region was the seat of power of some of the mightiest archfiends, holding cities of Rakshasas and demons. The foul spirits were bound long ago, but their power still lingers in this place. Vile creatures continue to crawl up from the depths of Khyber. And there are a handful of primordial ruins sustained by dark magic. Ruins that may still be home to fiends and their treasures. A mountain range known as the Labyrinth separates the Demon Wastes from the Eldine Reaches. Due to ancient warding magic, any foul thing that wishes to leave must pass through the labyrinth. These passes are guarded by the Gashkala, tribes of orcs sworn to contain the evils of the waste. The Gashkala worship a version of the silver flame that they call Kalak-Shash. They consider the people of the Five Nations to be soft and naive. The Carian tribes are savage barbarians who dwell in the wastes. Each tribe is devoted to one of the archfiends, and they engage in an endless battle against the Gashkala and the other Carian tribes. These people are mostly humans, but are corrupted orcs, half-orcs, and tieflings mixed in, along with a handful of other races represented. The Carian tribes are savage and cruel, and know almost nothing about the world beyond the labyrinth. And it gives you flavor, you know. So you're from here. What do you do? Who are you? What cultural influences are compelling your character? Jubilex is probably popular here. We'll have to be very wary of their religious practices. Well, I mean, if a slime is covering everything, it's coming from somewhere, right? It's kind of like not a Tyranid. I mean, yeah, Tyranid, but Zerg, they're creep, right? It's this slime that just goes over everything. Eldine Reaches, etc. and so forth. Caranthi characters, Lazar characters, Mror characters. As you can see, this supplement is doing a great job in priming you about the different areas of the main campaign setting. Thrain, Valinar, Zilargo. Now we get into aspects of everyday life. I suggest, and I've done this as well, think about your cosmology, think about your chronology. What is life like in your world? Are there 100 days to a year? Is a day 40 hours long? What holidays exist? Etc. and so forth. Hey, Diadems, good to see you. The Galifar calendar tracks the years since the Kingdom of Galifar was founded, using the abbreviation YK. This week, the week is divided into 7 days, with 4 weeks to a month and 12 months to a year. Despite the fall of Galifar, the nations of Corvair still use this calendar. The 7 days of the week in order are Sul, Mol, Zol, Wir, Zor, Far, Sar. The 12 months are named after the 12 moons that orbit the world. And it so is listed. In my own setting, a week, as we know, a medium unit of days, is called a 6-day. And it's called that because there are 6 days in a 6-day, or a week. There are 6 days to a month, and there are 10 months to the year. I have one moon, but it has a big hole in it. And so it's not 12, but what can you do? It has a big old hole through the middle of it. Crowns, sovereigns, Galifars, platinum dragons, names for the currency. If you want to add a bit more flavor and you don't want to just call it a copper piece or a silver piece, yeah, that'll be 3 sovereign. 3 sovereign, please. Oh, a platinum dragon. I think I might have a couple. Galifar to give back to you in change. Oh, and a crown for your service. You see how that can add a lot of, even a lot of depth or culture to your game, your narration, your world, if you go through and you take care of minor details like that. Also, if you're going to go and tinker with cultures, imagine their languages too. Alright? Common is the language of the 5 nations. The Maror dwarves speak Dwarvish and the Arani elves speak Elvish, but they know Common as the language of trade. In Eberron, there are a number of other languages that serve this role in different regions and cultures. The DM may change the languages assigned to a monster or NPC to reflect this. Giant is the common, quote-unquote, tongue of Zendrick. It is rarely encountered on Corvair. Monsters in Corvair usually speak Goblin. So Common itself is known in different contexts. This is a very good primer in how you go about that. In my campaign world, Common is actually a modern form of Draconic. The Common language is actually rooted in Draconic. And so you could take Draconic as a supplemental language, but it would be like learning Old English as a modern English speaker. There's also the Trade tongue, and trade is its own thing. It's a pigged-in language of mishmashes and other things that the more humanoid people use to communicate with the more bestial people, like minotaurs, lizard folk, etc. And it's called the Trade tongue because it's exactly that. It's simple and it involves a lot of gestures like etc. But the gestures and the intonations have developed so that it is fairly universal despite the beast race speaking it, let alone the humanoid race. And again, think of this too. Giant is kind of by default considered a foreign language in D&D. You may go to a place where Giant is actually the common tongue. And people will not speak Common, or at least they won't outside the center of a large city. Currency and hierarchy in my campaign is definitely themed by a deck of cards. Can you give some examples, Coffee? Obviously, I'm going over the Eberron stuff, and I'm throwing in my own game world. I'm throwing in my own game world considerations too. But if you all out there do different things, please share it. I want to know what you're doing. For authentic flavor, says Fluffy Sheep, make the players use Carolingian money. I am not familiar with that term, Fluffy Sheep. What do you mean? Memory says, could even break down the Common language into each region. Yes, that's true. Common doesn't even have to be common to a vast expanse. You may have a human that can speak Common in one other language, such as the PHB says. But that's like saying, all right, well, I have a human character that can speak English, and I get another language, French. And don't even look at Common like that, too. There could be regional dialects of Elven, of Giant, of Goblin, or Dwarven. How far you want to break that down, that's up to you as a DM. That can add depth. It can add complication. If you want both, you can have a lot of fun with it. If you like keeping things simple, or at least using a starting point and saying, okay, Common is English, let's just go from there. We all know that Elven is really just French. Something along those lines. Coffee Cat, the currency is as follows. Gold are queens, silvers are jacks, coppers are aces. In that case, do kings refer to platinums, or are kings kind of a slang term for jewels? The old style English money with shillings and like, oh, okay. And by the way, depending on your, depending on what you want to do, you could have an actual a commodity-based currency based on metals. If we look at Dragonlance, they had steel pieces because steel was a useful metal. If you wanted something that had value, you traded in steel pieces. And so you have other, like gold is decorative, and here's a little hint. Do any of you know why we tend to value gold in our culture and society? Why is gold the kind of the monetary default? Any of you know? If not, I'll tell you, but I want to give you first dibs. Names in the 5 nations. So naming conventions vary by nation. The Zil gnomes always use 3 names: a given name, a family name, and a clan name. Warforged often use a single name. Within the 5 nations, most citizens have a given name followed by a surname. This surname is either a family name or related to an occupation or region of origin. So Sorn Fellhorn, Kara of Windshire, and Talon Magerite are all names you might find among the common folk of the 5 nations. The noble families of Galifar, along with those granted lands and titles by one of the sovereigns of the 5 nations, add the prefix ear apostrophe, to their surname. So the surname Darrow Irlane tells you that this individual is a landed noble. The Winarns were the royal line of Galifar, and the current rulers of Yundair, Brayland, and Carenth are all heirs to the Winarn bloodline. Thus, Queen Aurelia and Aundair is Aurelia Ir Winarn. Another common prefix is D. Why am I... not parenthesis, not exclamation point. D apostrophe. Used by any heir of dragon-marked houses who has manifested a dragon mark. So Merix de Kenneth is a member of House Kenneth who has manifested the mark of making. This is excellent material for a DM, or even if you want to add personal depth to your character, even if your DM might not adhere to these rules. You can have a very expanded backstory as a PC. The ruler of the criminal organization Umbra is called the Queen of Hearts. And I like that you're sticking to themes and such, Coffee. Fluffy Sheep, Historical Blather. In a deck of cards, the ace is always represented 1. It became common to also treat it as the highest rank during the French Revolution, as it symbolized the lowest commoner being elevated above the royalty. Ah. Hey, Delcorn, good to see you. Bubonic, I had a world where silver was primary and 90% of nations made coins that could be broken down into 8 bits. Gold bar was worth 25 silvers and was never broken down. You traded bars. So yes, so on that note, the reason why we value gold in our culture, gold is an element that is, it does have scarcity to it. And so because there is scarcity, it can have intrinsic value. Think of this too. Gold does not rust. Gold also is easy to melt and shape, being a softer metal, into all kinds of shapes, whether they're bars for trading, coins for carrying, jewelry, etc. And so these aspects to the element of gold made it very valuable because it wouldn't disintegrate, it wouldn't rust. It was scarce, so there was an intrinsic value to it. And it was very easy to handle and manipulate. And so this perfect alignment of circumstances led us to value gold as a trade commodity. So here we have magic and Corvair. Here's a distinction. Wide magic, not high magic. So, common magic. Cantrips and first level spells are commonplace. Mage Rites, Wand Slingers, and Dragon-marked heirs can all produce these sort of effects, and you'll see the impact of the magic as part of everyday life. Common magic items can be found in any community and purchased in any major city, provided you can find a shop or Dragon-marked enclave that deals in what you're looking for. Common magic items generally range in price from 50 to 100 gold pieces. Megatron Riker, greetings to you. Welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us in our conversation and our exploration of the 5th edition version of Eberron and how it could translate into our own games or things to consider if you want to run a game inside the Eberron world or the setting. Bubonic is asking the most valuable coin in history. Want to hazard a guess? Anyone? I don't know. I avoid hazards, Bubonic. So in the campaign setting, and this is something for you to consider for your own homebrew world as well, is your magic wide? Is it high? Is it low? Or is there no magic? Do you like a no or low setting? You know, kind of Game of Thrones, where there's effectively not magic, but there kind of is magic, but it almost seems very remote. Or if it's not high magic, is it just deep magic? Is it an isolated well of unlimited depth, but there's one well that one person can tap into? Think of how you want to push, pull, prod, manipulate the influence of magic in your campaign world. And how this gets into different ways you can reflavor spells. Here's some examples of mage rites and the services they provide. Not every healer can cast Lesser Restoration, and not every oracle can cast Divination. These are the general guidelines. If you're a chef, prestidigitation on food only, to enhance the flavor. Purify food and drink as a ritual. Gentle repose, ritual, food only. This means you don't need a refrigerator. You don't need to get a frost elemental or something in a box. You can cast Gentle Repose on a beef loin, and it will be reposed until you decide to do something with it. Are you a healer? You're proficient with medicine and herbalism kits. These are like backgrounds, right? Spare the dying. Detect poison and disease. Lesser Restoration, 1 hour ritual, and there's a 50 gold piece component cost. So you can do it, you just do it a little bit differently. And we come down here where, as a profession, you just have access to these broad, low-level magical effects. Would it make sense that a locksmith would just intrinsically know Arcane Lock or Knock, even if it's cast differently? Proficient with Thieves' Tools and Tinker's Tools. Aluminum is easier to modify than gold, and it doesn't rust. It's easy to make shiny. And you know what, though, Bubonic? Because it is a lot more common, aluminum doesn't carry that kind of significance. Well, yeah, so I'm sorry. Yeah, based on your clarification, because of the way that we harvest aluminum, yeah. But now it's so common because of our modern techniques. And, we're at the point where we can make artificial diamonds. And what has that done to the diamond industry? And as we get into technology or modern alchemy, and lead to gold is something that may become common, you have to wonder what's going to happen, That's actually addressed in Star Trek, right? In Deep Space Nine particularly. You have synthesizers. It can make whatever you want. Food, drink, metal, plastics, parts. And so there was a type of element called latinum that a replicator could not replicate. And because it couldn't just be replicated, no matter what energy cost, that became a trade source because it was actually scarce. You couldn't just make more of it out of nothing. I mean, and they talked about gold pressed latinum, but it's funny because in Star Trek, gold has almost no value because it could just be replicated so easily. And by this point, you know, it's a dense, heavy metal. Presumably, the circuits have moved on. I mean, by Voyager, they're making biocircuits. There wasn't even really metal to speak of in those packs. And so gold just became whatever, as a lot of other things. And we see that trending with, 3D printers and look at how the world's getting smaller. I can order... I've said this example before. I can order an authentic Aboriginal carved didgeridoo from Australia, and I can have it overnighted to my front door in Ohio. It'll cost money, but I can have this didgeridoo. Does that mean that didgeridoos are valuable anymore? Well, maybe not as much as they could, because now they could be a lot more ubiquitous. Or I'll just 3D print a didgeridoo. Why even need to get a hand-carved wooden one when I can just make one? You know, things to think about. Fluffy shape aluminum is also just about impossible to refine without industrial level tech. And even without replication, gold isn't particularly rare in space. One Slinger, it's talking about how it's not a class. Anyone can perform an arcane magic, can be considered it. It gets into these cultural considerations, communication, fashion, medicine, transportation, as this is important. It goes into the lightning rail, which you see a lot in Eberron artwork. It is very important. It's infrastructure. How do people get around? If you don't have a road connecting two cities, you're not doing too well in Settlers of Catan, let alone in real life. Gets into custom rules for magic item creation, and now we get into the faiths here. The silver flame is the force of light holding foul demons at bay. Those who seek to defend the innocent from evil may draw on the power of the flame. You battle supernatural evil with steel, fire, and magic. Every mortal soul can be guided to the light, inspire and guide others to virtuous behavior. Force is a last resort. Listen to the voice of the flame, but beware that deceiving whispers of the shadow in the flame. This goes through and gives you a good breakdown if you want specific faiths or a pantheon and how you can custom brew your own. What do you consider? What is the philosophy? What are they trying to pursue? The blood of Vol. Each one of us has a spark of divinity within our blood and our spirit. Find that power within. Death is the end, dolor is oblivion, and if the gods exist, they are cruel. Stand with those you care for. All we have is our life in each other. And this is, it's a necromancy cult or religion that is probably given a bad name because it has these fatalistic tendencies. But even here, it's practical. They don't revere the undead. They believe that once someone's died, you might as well put the corpse to use. It's practical. Path of Light, the Undying Court. You get some nice symbols. Cults of the Dragon Below. King says, speaking of aluminum, that shiny elven metal that's also durable and lightweight kind of sounds a bit like mithril, eh? Yeah. You can have mithril pieces if you want, depending on the scarcity, the rarity. Or maybe the elves deal in that. And mithril to elves is common. But when you're trading mithril, whatever, to outsiders, they actually value more. And now you've actually set up trade disparities. I mean, positive or negative. Where to an elf, I mean, you go through, you go through the drive-through, and an Elven McBurger is 2 mithril pieces. You go to human lands, and they're like, "Oh, mithril! Wow, we don't have any of this stuff." Yeah, I'll sell you a horse for 2 pieces of mithril. Meanwhile, you just had a horse meat burger back in Elftown for the same 2 mithril. Just as we have the interaction with languages and such, so too can you set up these different trade disparities, coinages, and things along those lines. Also, Dark Wolf, if you're around, I don't know if you see this or you're getting a good look on your mobile device, but it looks like that there's some islands down here that you might end up inhabiting. All right, Coffee Cat, thank you for being a part of here and sharing your story, your background. It's a great conversation you're having with Memory Lapse. So, rest of the world, at least the commonplace. Now we're getting into how the different planes intersect with Eberron as a world. This sort of stuff is something that I just personally don't do. I don't run multiple planes in my homebrew world. I don't entertain that as a possibility. I do get that a lot of people enjoy it and they like having the exotic locations, and Eberron seemingly offers that, as it has these different planes intersect with it and manifest. Eberron is a very liminal. It has a liminality to it. And if you do have a cosmology in your world, whether it's the default D&D setting or it is, it's something like above here, and it's a prefabricated campaign one, not just a generic that's presented in the core 3. Think about it. Are these constellations? Are we talking astral? Are we talking metaphysical? What's the context to what we have going on? Each of these has its own manifested thing it does, right? It is the plane of, well, here, Fernia, the Sea of Fire. That's pretty obvious what's going to happen there, and you can give it a twist. It doesn't have to always be obvious. Fernia, the Sea of Fire. This plane encompasses both the raw elemental force of fire and the idea of fire. Flame used as a weapon, as a force that holds darkness at bay, as a destructive power and force for change. It is home to all manner of fire elementals and also to celestials and fiends that embody these ideas. Irian, the Eternal Dawn, a plane of light and hope. Irian is the source of positive energy in Eberron. Kithri, the Churning Chaos, the plane of chaos and change. Kithri is a morphic realm in constant flux. Lamania, the forest, or the Twilight Forest. While it is called a forest, Lamania embodies primordial nature and contains every possible natural environment. It is home to massive beasts, lycanthropes, elementals, and other things that reflect the power of nature. So with this setting, it is assigning why things exist in this central hub of Eberron and attributing it to a plane that is it's the one-hit wonder of that force. And everything stems from this ideology, this physical location, this bleed out into the environment that it provides. Astral and ethereal, so on and so forth. Celestials, gods, fiends. All things to think about. All right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take about a 10-minute break. And, we've gone through an introduction. We've talked about a lot of really good, solid campaign idea stuff. And when we come back, we won't make the characters. We'll save that for tomorrow. We'll make a Changeling and a Kalishtar. But we will delve into these 4 native races to Eberron and continue the exploration of this book. So all of you out there, thank you for participating, having a good conversation. And we'll continue forward and pick up and see what these races have to offer in preparation for tomorrow and Friday. So hang in there about probably closer to 10 minutes, and I'll be back.